Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ticker.com's news channel on YouTube. On this channel, we review stock markets and discuss financial news, market trends, and economic data from Wall Street to Global Street. So let's get started. On Wall Street, investors remain focused on earnings results, and the latest batch of economic data confirmed resilient economy despite elevated interest rates. Positive trends in earnings and economic data and renewed optimism about the artificial intelligence-linked stocks lifted market indices for the sixth consecutive week. Investors reacted positively to the latest updates on retail sales and weekly jobless claims. Retail and food services sales increased at an annual rate of 1.7% in September, but the pace of increase was the slowest in 8 months. Housing starts decreased 0.5% from the previous month in September to 1.35 million, and building permits fell 2.9% to 1.4 million. Housing completions declined 5.7% from the revised estimate in August to an annual rate of 1.7 million. Inflation in the currency union fell below the target rate of 2% for the first time in over 3 years. Inflation in the Eurozone peaked at 10.6% in October 2022 and has steadily declined to an annual 1.7% in September, below the central bank's target rate of 2%. This decline in overall inflation is primarily driven by the fall in energy prices, but core inflation, which excludes food and energy prices, remained at 2.7%, and service inflation stayed at 4%. European markets advanced after the European Central Bank lowered its key lending rates by 25 basis points, as widely anticipated. The European Central Bank lowered its deposit rates 3.25%, main refinancing rate to 3.4%, and marginal lending facility rate to 3.65%. Central Bank lowered rates for the third time in 2024 and second time in a row, and policymakers signaled that they are ready to lower rates if economic conditions warrant. China's GDP growth slowed in the third quarter to the slowest pace in 6 quarters amid persistent weakness in consumer spending and housing market. Japan's consumer price inflation in September eased to an annual pace of 2.5% from 3% in August. Core consumer price inflation, which excludes food prices but not energy prices, declined to an annual pace of 2.4% amid weakening inflation in energy and transportation prices. India's consumer price inflation rebounded to 5.5% in September from 3.6% in August. The overall annual inflation rate in September was the highest in 2024, surpassing the upper end of the target set by the Reserve Bank of India. In other economic news, China's exports and imports rose at a slower pace, indicating headwinds for tariffs and weak domestic demand. Moreover, new home prices in September declined 6.1% from a year ago across 70 mainland cities, a larger than 5.7% fall in August. Prices fell at the fastest pace since May 2015 and extended losses to the 16th consecutive month. Let us review key events in global bond, currency, and commodity markets last week. The yield on the 10-year U.S. Treasury edged higher to 4.11% after the latest economic data confirmed that the U.S. economy is resilient to higher interest rates, lowering the urgency for the Fed to trim rates. Crude oil prices dropped 7% to below $70 a barrel amid supply glut worries and a weak demand growth outlook for China. Natural gas prices hovered near 40 euros per megawatt hour due to escalating worries about the widening war in the Middle East and growing risk to supply disruptions. The euro edged lower to a 2-month low of $1.09 after the European Central Bank lowered its key lending rate by 25 basis points. The yen weakened 150.03 after the central bank officials reiterated the central bank is looking to raise rates gradually. We now shift our attention to major stock markets in the U.S., Europe, and Asia. The S&P 500 index and the Nasdaq Composite extended weekly gains to the 6th week in a row amid a positive economic outlook, a cooling inflation trend, and positive earnings. European markets resumed their advance amid a positive earnings outlook and expectation of the 4th rate cut in the year. The Nikkei 225 stock average halted a 6-week rally and inflation fell to a 5-month low in September. supporting the case for a gradual increase in interest rates. Hong Kong indices struggled after the latest batch of data showed slowing economic growth in China and persistent weakness in the housing market. Indian market indices declined for the second week in a row after a mixed batch of earnings and elevated inflation dampened market sentiment. Let us shift our attention to merger deals, market movers, and earnings update from leading companies last week. Procter & Gamble said the weakness in Greater China weighed on its quarterly results. Netflix, the streaming service provider, reported better than expected quarterly results after paid memberships increased by 14% to 202.7 million in the third quarter. CVS Healthcare, the drugstore chain, announced their preliminary third quarter earnings and replaced its chief executive. American Express said revenue increased 8% and earnings rose 2% in the third quarter, and the company lifted its annual earnings per share estimate range. EssilorLuxottica, the eyewear company, reported slightly weaker than expected quarterly results and said weakness in Greater China negatively impacted sales growth in Asia. Brunello Cucinelli, the Italian fashion company, reported a 12% increase in sales in its latest 9-month period. Hyundai Motor India's $3.3 billion IPO was oversubscribed by 2.4 times amid strong participation from institutional investors, but retail investors were not that interested. TSMC, the Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing company, reported sharply higher sales and earnings in the third quarter and said strong demand for artificial intelligence-related chips is likely to drive current quarter sales higher. Lucid Group, the electric vehicle company, announced a stock offering to sell 262.5 million shares. CSX Corp, the railroad transportation company, said weaker demand for coal transportation negatively impacted its quarterly results. Discover Financial Services reported higher than expected third quarter results, but total net charge-offs jumped from a year ago. Nestle, the Swiss food product maker, reported 9-month sales declined 2.4%. Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, and Citigroup reported better than expected revenue and earnings in the third quarter. In the week ahead, investors are looking forward to a batch of 450 company earnings in the U.S., including 3M, AT&T, Amazon.com, Baker Hughes, Hilton Worldwide, Moody's Corporation, Pulte Homes, Xerox Corporation, Verizon. Investors are also anticipating the release of U.S. durable goods orders on Friday and U.S. new home sales data on Thursday. In Europe, investors are looking forward to the release of business surveys in France and Germany and producer price inflation data in Germany and Spain. China is scheduled to revise its loan prime rates this weekend, and Japan is expected to announce its manufacturing and service sector surveys and Tokyo area inflation data. You can review daily U.S. and global financial market news, stock movers, earnings releases, SEC filings, and economic updates on ticker.com and 123jump.com. You can find the latest financial books on Rudera.com, keep up with financial industry events on eventsinamerica.com, review ETF and mutual fund performance and in-depth profiles on tickerfunds.com, and review market updates and stock movers in India on niveshak.in. That is all for today, and we will see you next